learning more things. I know some of you are from around here and already know some of the history, but I'm sure you'll learn more about what happened and the horrible story and everything. And thank you for joining us. I would like the board members, my name is Joyce Frywald. I'm president of the Historical Society. Would all the board members that are here stand up, please? So if you have any comments or complaints, complaints, and Rod, Mara's also here. He was our treasurer and he served many years faithfully. And Steve McClellan is our new treasurer this year. Somebody else that I had hoped would be here, but she's out of town, is Deborah Chamberlain. And she is the one that is responsible for all these things that are happening in front of the schoolhouse, all the indigenous plants, Michigan plants that have been planted there. She's sort of the spearhead of this whole project. We did give two $1,000 scholarships to high school students this year who put in time doing volunteer work. We have 4 students right now that are starting to do volunteer work with the Historical Society, and we're really excited about that. Want to remind you of the Buffalo Barbecue that's coming up 4th of July. It is going to be $10 this year. Inflation hits every place.
It's 9.
No, it's 10.
It's 10.
It's 10. It was voted by the board that it's going to be 10. We'll discuss this later, okay? Okay, and
Easier.
if you have, yeah, who wants to give a dollar change? That everybody will just say, oh, keep the 10 anyway, right?
Yep.
There are newsletters over there, membership forms, if you have not gotten a newsletter. And also all these programs that we have 3 each summer. If you go to our website, FifeLakeHistoricalSociety.org, they are on there that you can watch the programs from last year. And this program, and tell different people about it to share, so please remember that. Okay, and talk about inflation, we always have our donation jar there. Can't get away from that. Okay, now I'd like to introduce Noreen Roaring, our vice president, who is going to introduce our 2 speakers tonight. Thank you very much.
Well, I have about 52,000 things to say about our speaker here. Really, everybody, most of you know Al Hart. Al was a sheriff and, chief of police and then sheriff of Kalkaska County during a lot of this thing, and he's going to talk more about his background. So I'm just going to make it real simple, and let's give him a hand.
I got one rule. Anybody that falls asleep, that's what the white cup's for. Don't do that. Before I give my introduction, I want to let you know that tonight I'm going to be talking about different players in this whole event that took place. First and foremost are the Michigan farmers. And some of you in here I know are family members of farmers that were affected. Secondly, Michigan Chemical Company, that's the company that made the PBB and distributed it accidentally. Michigan Farm Bureau, which then took that feed, ground it, and sold it to farmers throughout Michigan. MSU, Michigan State University, which is closely tied with Michigan Farm Bureau. In fact, Michigan Farm Bureau started at Michigan State University, and Michigan State University has a laboratory that I'm going to talk about that was not properly used. There are other chemical companies that were involved as well. DuPont is one of them. Montessori is another, something, I don't know. But anyway, the big company. Monsanto, yes. Michigan Department of Agriculture was very much involved in that. I'll be talking about that. And I'm going to talk about our Michigan legislatures and our governor at the time, who also was involved in this, either directly or indirectly. So with that, I'll talk about myself. Most of you I know. For those that don't know me, my name is Alan Hart. I'm a local, born and raised here. I grew up on a small family farm in South Boardman, or in Boardman Township, as many people in here did. At the time that I grew up in the area, agriculture was the big thing. There wasn't all this tourism. You didn't have all the lakes with the boats and the docks, and I mean, you had a few cabins around the lake, but it just wasn't here. And out in the country, you didn't have these little plots of land with houses all over. There were farms, small farms. Our farm, we had 180 acres total, so it was a really small farm. We milked about a dozen cattle. We had pigs, we had chickens, and I'll talk about that. Fortunately for us, my father quit farming before this took place. So he quit farming in the 60s. This happened in the early 70s. Many of your families in here were still farming at the time and were drastically affected, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Why I was involved in this at all, I was a chief of police in Kalkaska when this all happened. And I took an interest in it because I knew the farmers involved. I visited some of the farms, I saw what was going on with the cattle, and I kind of got involved personally with that. And I went down to the burial site. I'll talk about where that is and how big it is in a minute. And people were not allowed in. You couldn't go in unless you had credentials to allow you to go in. And so if a farmer wanted to go and see what was happening, I'm sorry, you're not coming through the door. We're not gonna allow it. And so I thought, how in the world am I gonna get in? I know, I'll leave my uniform on and drive a police car. And so I did, and I drove right in. And I'd become a regular visitor down there to monitor what was going on. Not that I could do anything about it, but I really wanted to see what was happening, and I was really concerned about the farmers that were affected, and I wanted to know how they were being treated. I was then elected sheriff in 1976, so at the tail end of all this mess, I was the sheriff. Well, then I got down there quite often, especially back when they were doing the initial monitoring, water monitoring, and they capped the site and all that, fenced it and all that. So that's how I got there. Now, also here with me tonight is Denise Elsenheimer. She can talk about her family farm and how it was affected. And like many farmers around here, it was devastating. And so, Denise, you lived near Manton, correct? Mm-hmm. So she's gonna be able to talk about this affected farms that were contaminated with PBBs. Wasn't just here locally in Kalkaska, Missaukee, Wexford County. It was all over the state of Michigan. In fact, most of the cattle that were buried out here didn't come from a neighboring county. They come from all over Michigan. They were trucked in here. The 1-point-some million chickens come from all over the state. The pigs come from all over the state. The sheep, all the animals are buried out here, came from all over the state. And I'll talk about how that happened as well. Before we get Denise to talk about her story, I want some disclaimers. Number one, I'm not a lawyer. Number two, I'm not a veterinarian.
But we have Rose here.
We got Rose for that. I got people here that experienced most of this. Got any lawyers in here? Any lawyers? Oh, good. I'm also not a chemist. So if you get into the chemical makeup of PBBs, I can't explain that. I know they get the little diagrams and squiggles and it tells you what it is. I kind of know what it is, I just don't know how it is. I'm not a researcher. I never was involved in research. It just wasn't my thing. I was a cop. Cops don't research. Observations. The burial pit is here in Garfield Township, north of Fletcher Road. Today it's an open field, surrounded by a fence and signed with no motor vehicles. Also, it has several monitoring wells. I believe there's 16 of them around it. They're not being used, by the way. Nowhere is there any indication of what's buried out there. So if somebody just comes upon it, that's not from the area, they won't know. They'll say, oh, there's a fenced field. I wonder where they're growing grass. And that's about all they'll know. And it's this far from it. According to the state of Michigan, the area covers 25 acres, is only 15 foot deep. I'm here to tell you that's a lot of BS. I was there, I saw the hole. I know how deep it was. The other thing they will say is they stayed above the water level, the surface water level. Again, that's a lot of BS. They were dragging these cattle down and putting them in water, on groundwater, before they buried them. And the state will tell you they put a layer and then they covered it with 15 feet of dirt. Now they put a layer of dirt, layer dirt, layer dirt, and then dirt. So there are so many carcasses, and I'll talk about them in a minute. It really started, this whole PFAS or PBB thing started in 1973. And the burial went on in 1974 and 1975, and there are other sites as well. A total in Michigan, there were 32,000 cattle, pigs, and sheep buried in these pits, Kalkaska being the biggest one. There were also, I think, in somewhere like there's 1.5 million chickens buried. Also, milk was buried, eggs were buried, cheese was buried, all kinds of dairy products were put in these pits. It's located in section 10 of Garfield Township. That would be the eastern part of the township. It's on the northwest corner of Pine Road and 8 Point Road, for those who know the roads down there. If you don't know the roads and you want to go see this site, go out Fletcher Road. When you leave all of the buildings, all the farm buildings, you'll see a pipeline crosses the road. Can't miss it, big pipeline. Just beyond that is Pine Road. Take Pine Road north, a little over a mile, you'll encounter 8 Point Road. And off to the northwest corner of that is a big field. That's the pit. That's where it's all buried. So if anybody wants to go down there, you're certainly welcome to. Let's see, the pit itself was fenced in 1987 with a 4-foot high fence. It was re-fenced by the Michigan National Guard in 2009, and there were signs placed up there. There are 16 monitoring wells. I can't remember what year they put them. Anybody remembers things that I don't remember, please jump in. If you think of something I say and you know it's wrong, just be quiet. We'll talk. But they did put the wells in, and they did monitor the site for some time. And that was sheriff when all that happened. And I went out and I talked to the people who were doing the monitoring, the water quality people from the Department of Natural Resources. And initially, they were finding PBB in the water. PBB is not water soluble. It gets in water, it just stays in its truest form. So if you have water flowing and it's coming out of these carcasses, it's gonna go the way the water travels, and out there the water moves to the northwest. And then eventually the land drops off, gets wet, and turns into a little creek which runs into the Manistee River. And so they were concerned about this PFAS getting in that river system. And so they did monitor it, and initially they did find out there were PBBs in these monitoring wells. So what they did, they went back in, they recapped the entire pit with clay, and then dirt, and then planted grass. And I remember when that was going on. The state of Michigan claims, and we're going to talk a little bit about how the state got involved in this. The state of Michigan claimed that there's no longer any PBBs leaching out of that site. Okay, I really do believe them. Okay, it did, now it's not. Remember, PBB is not water soluble. It's still going to be there. It's still going to flow. There are other burial pits. There's another burial pit in Mile, Michigan. It's not quite as large as the one here in Kalkaska, not as many animals, but it was on state property, as was this one. Gratiot County landfill was also used. They used that for a lot of the contaminated feed, chickens and stuff like that. There are undetermined number of buried cattle and feed and area farms throughout Michigan. You know, a lot of these farmers would just, we've got a problem, I'm tired of dealing with this state, I'll take care of the problem myself, dig a hole, stuff goes in the hole and it's covered over, and it's on those farms yet today. So you can keep that in mind as we go through all this, and Janice can talk a little bit about it. I can remember going down to Ellery Williams Farm here at the south end of the county, when some cattle died, they just dragged them out in the woods. You let scavengers take care of it. There's no disposal at first. Later on, they come in and took the cattle. Here's the totals. In Michigan, the total is 1.5 million chickens, 30,000 cattle, 5,900 pigs, 1,470 sheep, an unknown quantity of milk and dairy products, and unknown quantity of contaminated soil and feed. This is all buried here in Michigan. It's ours forever. It does not go away. PFAS or PBBs are like PFAS. They're chemically made, man-made chemicals. They're not from natural products. So this man-made chemical has no way in our environment to destroy itself. It just stays. So welcome to the PBB world.
What was Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
What was it used for? Why did they?
oh, I'm gonna get to that.
Oh, okay.
We will get to that. In a minute, Denise is gonna talk specifically about some of that. But I wanted to lay the groundwork before she got a chance to yak at you. What is PBB? It is polychlorinated biphenyl, for you people who understand these names. Again, a man-made chemical. It was used as a fire retardant. Also was used in plastic development, computer monitors, televisions, furniture, and textiles as a retardant. It's known for its bioaccumulation. Bioaccumulation is the building up in living organisms. It has a tendency to do that. It builds up, doesn't go away right away, it builds up. It's insoluble in water. It's very soluble in organic matter. So like fat, it gets into your body and it loves that environment. It can accumulate in any living organism at any level. It will not break down easily for decades. I think the level that the state at the time was saying that 7 parts per billion was not good. If they wanted you to be down to 1 part per billion to be safe, if that could be safe. I think some of the farmers who were tested that worked with this, they were at 46 parts per billion.
Could they even test it in parts per billion in the 1970s?
Yeah,
Okay.
they did. Yeah, absolutely. They did. They in fact, they had to do that for not only this drug, but chemical and other chemicals. They did. Well, that's what I got out of it. So I wasn't there and I didn't do it. I'm not a researcher.
1 part per billion is.
Oh, it's minuscule. I mean, it's just minuscule. But this stuff is so potent. The Michigan Chemical Company that distributed this by accident, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, they only distributed, I think, not many, maybe a couple tons,
Yeah.
that did all this damage throughout the state. It wasn't like it was an ongoing contamination. It was a one-time deal, 1973, that caused this catastrophe. I'll talk about how that happened. Michigan Chemical Company, located in St. Louis, Michigan, made and distributed PBB to firms that used it for fire retardant. It's a private company, not Michigan owned. The same company at the same place bagged livestock feed supplement for farm animals, specifically magnesium oxide. Magnesium oxide is like a vitamin that we would take as a human. We use that for cattle feed. And I know when I was working with Carol's brother, raising cattle, we used that in our supplement. We had made sure the magnesium was in there. It's a vital component to have in feed. They were both bagged in very similar bags by this company. So they used bags that looked exactly alike for the PBB and for the magnesium. Almost identical bags. The only difference, I think, was there was some label put on them, small label. They were then put together, both components, in a warehouse. So now you got a warehouse with pallets with bags that look all alike, and you're gonna ask some worker on a high-low to go get a few pallet loads of this stuff, put it on a truck, we're gonna ship it to Michigan Farm Bureau. And so this truck driver who has no clue about it, works in a warehouse, this is what I do, just load this stuff up, they went and grabbed some. And they grabbed the wrong stuff. And that went to Michigan Farm Bureau. Michigan Farm Bureau had a big processing plant in Battle Creek, Michigan. And what they did at this processing plant, they ground feed for cattle supplements and cattle feed to farmers and sold it. It was a big state business. Many, if not most, farmers in Michigan bought their feed from Michigan Farm Bureau. The reason they did is Michigan Farm Bureau, which was formed in 1919 at Michigan State University, originally was there to support farming, eventually got into the business of helping farmers. One of the ways they help farmers is they supplied feed at a reasonable cost. And you could only buy the feed if you were a member of Michigan Farm Bureau. And then they had almost a complete blank check of delivering feed to you as a farmer. And that's how that all came about. Answer your question? Okay. That feed the Farm Bureau processed went to all kinds of livestock, not just cattle. We think about cattle because the sheer volume of 30-some thousand head of cows is unbelievable. And I mean, picture it. Where would you put 30,000 head of cattle in this area? I mean, you need a very big hole to do that. Most of them were buried right here in Kalkaska. It affected many, many farmers. How many people here grew up on a farm that was affected by it? So we got a few of you. Denise is going to talk to you a little bit about her family experience in the farm and what happened with them, which is typical of what happened to farmers throughout Michigan. So Denise, you got it.
I'm gonna end with a story that'll lead into the politics. I'm gonna end with a story. that'll
Okay,
lead
yeah,
to
absolutely.
politics.
Whatever you want to talk about.
Hello,
Hello.
my name is Denise Elsenheimer. My maiden name was Snyder. We moved up into the Manton area in 1970 from the Detroit area, and we moved into my grandparents' house, who had, a bunch of outbuildings, and so my dad really wanted to get into farming, and so he bought a brown Swiss and a Holstein heifer. They were heifers. We raised them, we fed them, and in 1972, we bought the farm down the street from my grandparents, and so it had a nice stanchion barn, and big barn for hay, and with it came 30 acres, so it is even smaller than yours. And we were dependent on getting our grain. We didn't have a silo. We didn't have our own corn supply, so we were dependent on the corn grain, and we got it from the mill in Manton usually. So in about it was the summer of 1974, my one of our family friends wanted to get out of farming, and so my parents, they bought their cows, and but there was by then Farm Bureau had sent out a letter that said you weren't contaminated. It didn't come to you. And so my dad and mom bought the cattle under that pretense that they were never affected. And and I have to do a disclaimer too. I'm telling this from my perspective. Most of the facts are correct, but it's going to get into some opinions. So, and opinions formed when I was 15. So, in what my family went through. So anyways, we bought this herd, and the fun thing was we got to herd them 4 miles. We weren't gonna haul them in trailers. We herded them, and which was a lot of fun. Some of them were pretty crazy, they'd stray off or whatever. But anyways, and of course herding or moving them in trailers can be stressful on a cow. So you would normally expect that your milk production is going to go down until they get settled into where they're at and get accustomed to where they're at. And so the thing is that the milk production never went back up. It stayed on the lower end, and some of the cows were showing signs of not doing well. First of all, we had cows that couldn't get up. We had cows with cysts on them. We had cows, we had one cow back out of the stanchion and fall down dead. We had calves dying for no reason, and I fed the calves. And I knew what I was feeding them, but they were dying for no reason. You know, we would give them the colostrum for the first 3 days of their life because the mother's antibiotics are in there, and you know, and then feed them a supplement, milk supplement, to the point to they can start eating grain and hay. So so my dad took them down to Michigan State University to be evaluated, and they told him that he was a bad farmer and that his farming practices were to blame. Were to blame for the calves dying, for the milk production being low. It was his fault. Now he took pride in farming and listening to other farmers and learning and in doing things with good practices, and yet they just told him he was an awful farmer. And then, like I said, the cows started, they looked like they were starving, but they weren't. Well, our vet was Dr. Alpha Clark, and he's from McBain, and he was a great vet, very, very personable. He loved large animal veterinary medicine, and you know, my dad would call him out when things got, you know, our cows weren't doing well, and so Dr. Clark was instrumental with a guy named Rick Helbert. And Rick Helbert was a former chemist turned farmer. And he noticed his cattle were sick. And so him being a chemist started doing some research. And you know, all his cows were destroyed. But Dr. Clark also was, they figured out that it was fat soluble, or it was in the fat. And so, he had been seeing it all around the area. It wasn't just our farm. It was farms in McBain and farms all over. And so what happened is Father Clark, oh my gosh. Can you tell I work in a church? A Catholic church? Dr. Alpha Clark, he asked my dad for permission to take those fat samples and send them out, take samples from our cows and send them out to independent labs, not Michigan. They were outside of Michigan. And so my dad gave him permission, and it did come back that our cows were infected. Now, I talked about our little brown Swiss and our little heifer. The feed that we got from Manton, as far as I would know and was told, never had the contaminant in it because it wasn't a Farm Bureau product. McBain Co-op sold grain that was a Farm Bureau product. And one weekend my dad ran out of grain, and so he had to go to McBain to get grain for the weekend. And needless to say, even our little brown Swiss, she was big by then. She didn't like women either. She pushed me into a corner one day. My dad got upset. Not at me, but at the cow. But I mean, so all of our cows had to be destroyed. and our calves had to be destroyed, and sometimes calves had birth defects, and I want to say I remember a calf being born without an anus, and that was so weird. This poor calf, he couldn't get rid of, or she couldn't get rid of any waste from herself. Now obviously she died. So what happened was, about that time, there was a farmer called, his last name was Bovine in McBain, and all of his cows were contaminated. And again, Dr. Clark tested his animals, and they were all contaminated. And Mr. Zutterveen refused to allow those cows, or those cows, the meat, the dairy, to go to for public consumption, because we could still sell milk. If we weren't quarantined, we could sell milk and the meat, and because it was not brought to light, and I don't think the government knew what to do with this, but I also believe they covered it up. Yes.
I got a question. You said Doc Clark sent samples out. Did he send them to Michigan State also?
Yes, he sent them to Michigan State first. Michigan State Laboratory said there's nothing in it.
That's what happened.
And then that's why he sent them out of state. They actually went to Wisconsin. In the private laboratory in Wisconsin, tested it, and immediately come back, you've got high levels of PBV.
They sent ours to Wisconsin and New York. Michigan
Yeah.
State said, you got no problem.
Yeah.
Everybody else said, you're done.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what happened with us. He didn't send them to Michigan State. He said, I'm sending them out to an independent laboratory, and that's what he did. So Mr. Zutterveen called a bunch of farmers, and this is described from my dad, so I wasn't physically there, but it was like his land was like a bowl, and so he let all his cows out into this bowl, and there were farmers all along the ridge, and they were just shooting them dead.
And Denise, there's a picture of that in the archives. The newspapers actually have pictures of those farmers standing on that rim with rifles,
Yes.
shooting the cattle.
Yep. Yeah, my
And
dad was one of
that pit
them.
is not in Michigan or Mile or anywhere else that we know of. It's down on that farm.
Yeah. Yeah, that, and it changed my dad a lot. What came from that? Well, our cows went under quarantine. We now had to dump our milk. We couldn't eat it. What Michigan Farm Bureau did at the beginning, when the PBB contamination first started, they put in an insurance, where they had money to help pay these farmers who had contaminated cattle. The initial farmers got a great payout. But as it kept growing and growing and growing, they didn't have the money. And so to get them to come and take our cows, my mother was the Department of Agriculture Secretary calling Milliken and pretending to be their secretary, or public health. I would stand there when I went, Mom, you're not a secretary. But anyway, they did what they could do. To get them to come and get our cattle. And by the time they came to get our cattle, we got 20 cents on the dollar. So economically, we lost our livelihood. And then we only got 20 cents on the dollar. And then, but we got 20 cents on the dollar, but there were people that even got less than that. And it's really funny too, that our neighbor next to us said, oh no, my cows they're not contaminated. He was a big Farm Bureau man. Somehow his cows disappeared in the middle of the night. And that's no joke. They did. They came and got them. I don't know where they went. I would assume to a kill yard.
I'll talk about that. That's what happened.
But then there's others like our family who were not Farm Bureau people. They stalled and stalled and stalled, and it took a lot for them to come get it. Oh my gosh! And so then we didn't have any cattle. Now we have a cleanup. We had to tear down that stanchion barn. We had so much of the soil had to be taken away. Our milk house, they steam cleaned it because it was all steel. We have buried cows on the land. My sister owns that land, so I'm not gonna worry about it. So then the testing started. First of all, when I was by this time I'm a senior in high school, and it was in the fall, and we had to go down to Butterworth Hospital, and they had people there to take our blood, and we had like a physical. And we were part of that initial roster of people who public health was following. And Emory University helped, and they still do. They still keep tabs. But I had it the highest in my family. And so we went through that testing. We had highest, and I had the highest. And do you know that when I had my children, one of the things is it goes into the fat tissue. Breast milk is fat tissue. And with Becky, I said, no, I'm not gonna breastfeed my kids. Wow, that's the way to go. I said, no, I've got PBB inside of me. I don't know what it's doing. And this is 1985, 5. And I said, oh, no, it's not a worry. You don't have to worry about anything. I said, the research isn't even 10 years old. Don't tell me I have to worry about anything. And I would not breastfeed my children because I knew that I could contaminate them if it's still in me, and how it breaks down, which it doesn't. And as you can see, I have a lot of fat tissue. So and with my other two kids too, and they wanted to give me the bottle. They kept they forgot to give me the bottle because breastfeeding was all about, it was the rave. And I refused. And so I always had to ask for a bottle when I was in the hospital. Made me mad.
Is there a summary of the human toll here at Calcaster? by any chance?
I'll talk about that, no. The
Yeah.
answer's no, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
And then, so that is some of the repercussions. My sister has fertility issues, and my aunt, who they also drank the milk and ate the meat because she's younger than me, and they lived down the street, and so they would get their milk and their meat from us. So it does affect, and they followed me. They followed me, and they put my kids on it too, and then my kids didn't want anything to do with it, and by this time it's in the 2000s, and I'm like, I'm done. It's just, so I don't know if I'm still on that roster or not, but I was initially, my whole family was. Okay, so then now people have lost their livelihood. And so there's all these class action suits. And there was one in Cadillac. And Takamas from McBain had the best case scenario so the Farm Bureau lawyers, the lawyers for our class action suit were from Grand Rapids, and they took on our case. And it wasn't a quick case, it dragged on. And now this is, I think it's true, but it's been said that finally Judge Peterson had come with a verdict, and the lawyers for the class action suit were, for us, were convinced that we would win because of all the evidence. Even the Farm Bureau defense people were convinced that we would win. Now this is, so I don't know if it's a rumor or it's true, that Milliken made a midnight run up to Cadillac to talk to Judge Peterson the night before he gave the verdict. Farm Bureau won. And so, you know, it just, they were not forefront in the beginning, and then they tried to cover it up, and big Farm Bureau people tried to say, oh, I don't have it. And you know, all of this, my dad had a heart attack. He had a heart attack, he went out, milked cows, came in and said, need to take me to the hospital, I'm having a heart attack. And it was due to the stress of this whole thing. Outwardly, my family did not look any different. I can't say that's true for other families. Where one of my dad's friends, he looked like he aged like 30 years. And just horrible. And they would also get sick, but I don't know enough about them personally, I just know about my family. So I'm gonna end with this story. I'm a graduate of Michigan State University, and I'm very proud of that. Don't like the fact they call my dad a poor farmer, because he wasn't. But, and I was, you know, I actually have a degree in dairy science, a bachelor's degree in dairy science and human physiology, but that's besides the point. I even did research on reproductive issues with cows because they're so similar to women. But that's, anyways, so here I am getting ready to graduate. Who is the keynote speaker? Milliken. I would not tell my parents that he was keynote because I wanted them at my graduation. That's how strong, and my mom goes, well, we would have come because it's for you. I said, I don't want to take a chance. I wanted you there. So, yeah. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I can't go for 3 hours, so I may have to cut down a little bit, but I'm going to address some of the things that Denise talked about. Dr. Clark, Alpha Clark, here's a picture of Dr. Clark. He was born in 1934 and died in 2022. His office is still there on M66, just beyond McBain. If you drive beyond McBain, you look off the left, you'll see a little building. And last time I was there, still said Dr. Clark on it.
Well, it could be his son.
Could be his son, yeah. His daughter was also
Right on
that.
that sharp curve,
What's that?
right
Yeah.
on the sharp curve.
Yeah, right at the sharp curve, yeah. And that's where he's, and think about veterinarians, and I had a whole big thing I'm gonna cut down a little bit. The thing about veterinarians is they develop a relationship with their farmers, or the pet owners, right, Rose? If you develop a really close relationship, and especially with the dairy market, the dairy cow is the center of the farmer's life. And the veterinarian is the doctor who keeps those cows healthy. So Dr. Clark became really concerned when all this was going on. And it wasn't just Denise's family's farm, it was all the farms in the area that used his services. And he knew there was something there. He sent the samples originally to Michigan State University laboratories. Michigan State Laboratories said there's nothing in it. Well, why would they do that? And I can answer that. The Michigan Farm Bureau was very strong politically and socially within the farming community. Members of Michigan State University Board were also Farm Bureau members. The people who worked in the laboratories were also affiliated with the Farm Bureau. The legislatures, many of them come from farming communities but were highly influenced by Michigan Farm Bureau. Governor Milliken, she talks about, his Department of Agriculture staff all were associated directly with Michigan Farm Bureau. So he was being told one story, and reality was totally another. There was a cover-up. There's straight out and out cover-up. Why would they cover that up? Money. We're talking about a lot of money. As a result of all this thing that went on, as a result of what Dr. Clark pushed on to resolve it, Michigan Farm Bureau quit doing the feed business. They got out of the feed business. Michigan Chemical Company went bankrupt.
Didn't they go bankrupt?
On that part of their
Farm
part,
Bureau,
yeah.
yeah.
That's why they shut it down.
Yeah.
They went bankrupt because they were trying to pay out what little bit of money they were paying out. And Denise is absolutely right. Some farmers come out all right on this. The small farmers traditionally did not. The other thing that happened, and why we're talking about this yet today, many of the farmers relied on Michigan State to tell them, finally when they admitted there was some PPB problem, how much PPB was in their cattle. So Michigan Farm Bureau Labs would come back and say, well, you are a low-risk cattle herd. Well, if you were a low-risk cattle herd, you could get a certificate from the Michigan Department of Agriculture to have your cattle butchered. And so they went off, a lot of the cattle that were contaminated went off to the slaughterhouses. In the slaughterhouses, steaks, hamburger, and their claim was, well, if we make hamburger out of them, it'll be so diluted with healthy cattle that you won't even know it. The trouble was all the cattle were contaminated. So there was no dilution. It was fed to people. We all ate it. The milk, what little milk these farmers were still getting, where did it go? It went to milk producers. And it was distributed, not only in Michigan, in other states around us. We consumed that milk. Same with the chickens. Same with the dairy products that were made from that milk. It was distributed and we ate it. There was a monitoring, and some of the farmers, and Denise's family is one of them, they eventually concentrated on some of the farmers to see how they tracked with this PPE in their system. But it wasn't just farmers that were tested. If you were a young mother during the time, you probably were tested by the health department to see if you had PPE levels, Carol was, in your milk, so your child could be breastfed. They were somewhat concerned. I was always skeptical about the results because I kind of knew of what happened prior to that. They were still trying to cover their butts. And so this big conspiracy thing, it's not a pie in the sky. It really happened. It really happened. Dr. Clark was instrumental in pushing that forward. At one time, and I remember when this happened because I was dealing with the sheriff in Missaukee County. The state of Michigan told Dr. Clark that they were going to come to his office. They were going to confiscate all of his PBB records, and if he didn't comply, they were going to take his vet license from him. So what did the local farmers do? They said, "Give us a call when they're coming. We'll be there with our rifles." They're not taking it. Yes.
I had worked for Ellery Williams all through that PB.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I got to meet Dr. Clark a lot, and he had the largest collection. When this was over, he had the largest collection of, a private citizen as far as PBB. He went as far as to tell me how many times his life was threatened because he was withhold, and he wouldn't release it. The minute he released it, he says, "I know it's gonna be gone."
Absolutely.
And yeah, it was.
There actually are 29 boxes, big file boxes, of his records over this PBB incident, and he donated them. His family donated them to Central Michigan University, and they're on in their system down there, and they're open for public view. The only thing that they did not send down to Central Michigan were the newspaper clippings that were personal. The family kept those. But if it hadn't been for Dr. Clark, and who was the other?
Hilbert.
Yeah,
Hilbert.
yeah, he was another farmer, and he was with Dr. Clark and knew there was some kind of chemical reaction going on because of his background. And so if it wasn't for those two guys, and specifically for Dr. Clark, we still probably wouldn't know what really happened to the PBB site. So, and I'm not gonna go, I had a bunch of stuff on Dr. Clark, but
One thing I thought, the police, sheriff in Missaukee County told him to carry a rifle
yeah.
in his car.
Yeah, it was a trying time. But the thing is, again, we go back to what the community around here in Missaukee County was like at the time. It was a very agricultural community with farmers, and this was their livelihood. And somebody in Lansing was messing with their livelihood, and they weren't going to take it. And that's before you had all these paramilitary people running around with AKs and all that. These are just farmers with deer rifles, but they were gonna take care of business. You don't mess with these people. Let's see. I talked about that a little bit. We don't know what happened to a lot of the secondary exposure components. Example, and again, I happen to know Ellery Williams Farm because they were friends of my grandfather, and we spent a lot of time down there. And Ellery ultimately was one of the commissioners when I was a sheriff. What happened at his farm is they took all the cattle finally, and they probably in this bit or a mile, and then he cleaned everything up, got new feed, clean feed, not from Michigan Farm Bureau feed, filled up his feed bench and started feeding his cattle, and he got a secondary exposure because the PBB was in the walls of the bins where he stored the stuff. It just goes on and on. Remember, that stuff is not water soluble, so you could power wash all you want, and all you're doing is putting it around on the floor. It just doesn't go away, and it still doesn't go away.
That's why we had to knock down our stanchion barn, because it was made of wood and not steel.
It absorbs in the wood. Anything that's organic, it'll be absorbed in. Michigan Department of Agriculture is the agency that was tasked with checking these PBB levels. So these farmers would go to them and they say, my cows have these distorted hoofs, and they've got abscesses the size of footballs, and their milk production's gone down, they lost weight, and they don't eat, and they can hardly get up. What do I do with them? They said, we'll test them. They would test them, whoever tested them, come back and say, there's nothing wrong with them, take them to the market. Off they go to the meat markets, be sold. And you can't blame these farmers, because if they didn't do that, they lost everything. Lost everything. And again, Michigan Department of Agriculture, who, by the way, members of the control of Michigan Department of Agriculture all had been a part of Michigan Farm Bureau. This was just one big happy family. I kind of want to wrap it up here because you don't want me to go 3 hours. I want to get to closing remarks, and we'll get to questions and answers in a minute. three things that I thought of when I did this. Why, after all these years, should we care? Number one. Number two, I want to compare briefly PBB with PFAS. And number three, most importantly, what can we do, all of us? First part, why should we care? We should care because PBB is still here. It's still in us. I would dare say, probably if you didn't grow up in Michigan, you're all right. If you grew up in Michigan, you got PBB in you. What level, we don't know, but it's there. It's there. Just don't rely on Michigan State laboratories to tell you what's there. We still don't know what the effects are. We think we know. We really don't know. It's been assumed because of laboratory experiments with mice and rats and whoever they do experiment on, that they know that PBB is a carcinogen to those little animals. Well, believe me, if it's a carcinogen to a little animal, it's to us big animals too. So we can't really definitively tie it to various cancers, but there's a strong indication that cancers of the liver, pancreas, bladder, stomach cancers, breast cancer.
Thyroid issues.
Thyroid is a big one.
Yes.
That's all tied into the PBB. We just have never received, we've never received a definitive answer, and research is kind of died off. Why has research died off? It's been 50 years ago. That's in the past. Won't worry about that. We got PFAS now. We'll worry about that. Well, no, we've got to worry about both. The other thing that's been associated with or believed linked to is early menstrual cycle young girls and testicular issues with boys. People who've had contamination also complain of nausea, abdominal pain, loss of appetite, joint pain. All of these things are just symptoms we believe are tied there. We don't know because the early research especially was so tainted. We simply don't know. We can pass the bill up in our bodies through future generations. Grandchildren of people who were on the farms have been tested and they show fairly high levels of BBB. So it's gone from one generation to the next to the third generation. And we expect that to kind of continue. So you need to be concerned. And understand that PBBs will live in any organic organism, especially the fatty ones. Myself. Briefly, PBB and PFAS, the comparison is they're both man-made chemicals. They're not from any natural sources. We're familiar with PFAS. Anybody here not heard of PFAS? Yeah, it's a fire retardant, something like PBB. It's in the same family of drugs. It comes. What's that? Not drugs. Chemicals. Thank you. My wife always corrects me on these things. We're concerned about PFAS because it's in the news right now. PBB was in the news and is no longer in the news. But we need to compare these types of chemicals, and we need to stop mass production of chemicals that we don't know what it does. Yeah. Just because you have a chemical, hey, I got this new chemical, we want to throw it out there, and we'll see what happens. No, we've got to do the test, research, and know what we're putting out there. Not all chemicals are bad. I'm not trying to say that. There's some great chemicals, but some of them are really bad actors, and PBB and PFAS are two biggies.
The one thing, though, if you look at a map of the United States, PFAS is far more reaching.
Yeah, PFAS is all over the nation, and in fact all over the world. Where
PFAS is so popular because of the air bases and things.
Right.
They sprayed the jets with them.
Well, when I was in the Navy, we did fire training, and they put a big room of foam, and we walked right through. That was PFAS. So yeah, it was out there. Yeah, the military spread a lot of it, and civilian air did it as well. What can we do? Number one is you need to stay aware and make other people aware that this exists. Take them for a drive out there and say, take them out on that pit and walk on it and say, we're standing on 30,000 head of cattle and a bunch of sheep and pigs. I mean, it's unbelievable. Demand more research not only on new chemicals, but demand more research on the effects PBB has had on us. And always question. Don't just accept what people tell you. If there's a vested interest, if you have a chemical company, they made a new chemical, they're not gonna be completely truthful to you because they're gonna wanna sell their chemical. So question it, just question it. You know, and if you've got concerns, a good source to go to is the media, because you'll have people in the media that'll delve into it and have the resources to do it. But do that, you have to do it. See, I'm not gonna talk about that, I'll cut that back a little bit. Speaking of questions, any more questions with Denise or I that we can possibly answer?
This was just a one-time event that
Yes.
started the whole deal?
Yes.
I mean, that's. when
One-time
the-
event, happened in 1973. Some high-low driver lifted the wrong pallets and put them on a truck to go down to Battle Creek to be grounded to feed. And in fact, it happened in 1973. By 1974, we started seeing the effects of it. And you can't believe how bad that was. These cattle's hoofs, they were that long and curved, they couldn't stand up. They were obviously in pain. The abscesses were the size of footballs. It was all pus. You poke a knife in it, it'd spray all over you.
Part of that cover-up too was when they contaminated the feed. In my opinion, they knew it right away. But there was a supplement that they put it in, and that supplement was very expensive, so Dad would never get it. All of a sudden, the price came right down. Turned out, by God, now's the time to buy it. Then we got the PBB. So they put it in the feed, but then they put it in the supplements too, and you can't tell me that that wasn't to get rid of it.
Yeah, it could be. You know, I know there's a big cover-up, and I know that there was a lot of people involved in it. What was intentional and what was unintentional, I wasn't
Right.
there. I can't tell you, but I do know where it came from. I do know where it ended up, and I do know the results of it. And when I went out that burial pit, and I watched them take these cattle, truckloads, semi-truckloads of cattle were coming in. They were being euthanized. Some of the cattle were in such bad shape, they couldn't unload them from the truck. They took a winch, tied around the critter, and dragged them out of the truck. And then they loaded them up, and I was talking with Tom earlier, these clams you see they can pick up logs with, they use those to pick the carcasses up, drop them in a pit. Somebody in the pit had one, and they pick it up, drop it over next to, in line, they lined them all up, and then they had a couple guys down there with knives, and they had opened the cattle up, so they didn't want the carcass to blow up with gases. And these guys would walk around with hip boots in bloody water. It was gross, yes.
I worked for neighbor's farmer when I was in high school.
Reitman's?
That was later, Montgomery.
Okay,
Gary died when he was 46.
Yep.
And this was in mid-70s.
Yep.
And I theorized, this is my own opinion, that may have been from that chemical.
well, not only did people die from some cause, probably by the chemicals, and I agree with you, there were a lot of suicides. Farmers were killing themselves. I can remember, I watched a video, and I don't remember where the video was now, but it was this farmer whose cattle were contaminated. He had a big herd, I mean, he was milking a couple hundred cows. And he was talking about getting rid of his cattle, and he knew he had to get rid of them, and they ended up in one of the pits. But he said, you know, stop for a minute, my grandfather built this farm, bought cows. The cows I have today are descendants of those original cows. It's all gone.
I just ran across a note I'd written, because Patty Cox had told me about her mom, Geraldine Montgomery, and Geraldine had said, if I would have been a cow back then, I had so much PBB in me, they would have killed me.
Yep. It was really bad. The trouble was, in Michigan, they weren't admitting to all those PBB levels. It was only because of an outside source that Dr. Clark and his associates could prove it was there. You know, we knew it was there.
You touched on an important subject when you hit the burial pit. Now, I know Berkey family, that come and clean the topsoil as well as countless other dairies. There are dairies left in this county that they never remove the topsoil. Ellery Williams is one of them.
I know. I know, and when I went down to Ellery's, the first cattle that died, he was dragging out back. The coyotes and crows and stuff would eat them, but he didn't know. He couldn't find any answers.
They told him his levels were not high enough
Yeah,
for sufficient cleanup.
that's what they told all of them.
So he didn't even get in on the cleanup, so.
Yeah, and that's the excuse they used with most farmers.
Yeah.
Only those farmers, and Denise kind of pointed out, that had influence with Michigan Farm Bureau got the resources they needed to clean up. The other farmers did not, and their excuse always was your levels aren't high enough.
Right.
If people complained of health issues, they would say, well, you know, your levels aren't high enough, it wasn't PBB, it's something else. If your farm cattle were getting bad, it's because you were a poor farmer. They had excuses for everything. Yeah.
You wonder why it got statewide when it was in just one feed manufacturing spot. That feed manufacturing spot made concentrated feed that came in 100-pound
Oh, yeah,
bags
yeah.
that you mix like 100 pounds to 500 pounds.
You put it on top of your silage or hay.
That feed from that mill went to every Farm Bureau mill in the country.
It did.
Calcasta
Yeah.
was lucky. We was a master mix mill.
Yeah.
Cause I was there at
Yeah.
the time.
Well, part of the deal was a lot of the private individual mills bought their feed supplements directly from Farm Bureau.
Yeah,
And so even though you're going to a mill you think are clean,
the bigger ones did.
yeah, you're still getting this stuff. And not every farm, by the way, was contaminated. There were farms that were not. It's because what Tom said,
Yeah.
they were independent. They were grinding their own feed, raising their own feed, or they got it somewhere else. But most farmers, especially small farmers that didn't have a lot of land and couldn't raise their feed, were buying it. Yes.
Thyroid problems run pretty rapid in our family.
Oh.
So 15 years ago, when I was doing a lot of research, when people would say, you know, there's nothing wrong with you or whatever it may be, I got into the Emory website. And even though we weren't from the farm, our families had farms. So I registered on that for the hope that someday that there would be money there, even though we know we have it, because everybody in Michigan has it. You know, we just do. That they'd be able to bring that out and we would all be able to have that peace of mind that, yeah, that's the reasons why we have all these health issues. Because you struggle, you go to doctor to doctor to doctor, and you do not get answers. They don't have an answer for it.
You made a good point. You want to have peace of mind. And that's the whole issue that everybody wanted. They just wanted answers. They had Michigan Farm Bureau come out right away and said, we really screwed up.
Right.
We're going to take action. We're going to correct it. That wouldn't be an issue like it is today. But it was such a wide cover-up from Michigan Farm Bureau, Michigan State, and the state of Michigan that you can't trust them anymore.
And they shipped it all over.
And they shipped it all
Hoping
over.
it would weaken the strain, maybe
Yeah.
weaken
Yeah, they're going to dilute it. Well, they
Yeah.
don't. You don't dilute it.
yeah.
It's only soluble in fat.
After we had it, it was a few years, wasn't it? Tim and I really talked about going back into farming. And they told us at that time, to tear down the barn, cause like you said, nothing is water soluble. Build on a different site and think, how in the heck could we afford to do that, you know? So, we did nothing.
Did your dad lose cattle on that?
Yeah, he lost 100,
Yeah.
not counting the ones that had died a couple years previous. And you talk about the birth defects on them, boy, I've never seen.
Yeah, it's awful. You can't imagine in your worst nightmare what an animal can look like. That was the cattle.
It was horror. I can remember going to the barn from the previous night to milk in the morning, and a cow that looked perfectly normal will be laying
Down.
there, tongue hanging out, and
Yeah,
there was no stopping. I mean, the only thing you could do is shoot them.
Yeah, it was. It just, like I said, if you didn't see it or weren't there, you just can't in your mind imagine what these poor animals went through. Not to mention the people who owned them, and then what potentially we're going through, all of us.
That's what I'm worried about is the health concerns. And I've talked to my doctor about it, and he's real interested in it, and he's related to Tacubus. He said we have no proof. But there was no history in our family till after this You knew Sharon, she died of cancer. My mom died of cancer. All of us boys have got joint issues, have had replacements. I mean, anything you can think of, we're getting it now. And at the time, they said, we don't have to worry about now, we've gotta worry about 40 years later. Well, we're in that period.
Yeah.
Look at the second generational stuff like Michelle, what happened to Michaela.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different things like growing up. We're over to Larry and Sharon's house all the time. We're at Durwood and Ethel's all the time. We ate that milk. We drank the milk. We ate the meat. And there's been situations in our immediately family that again tie into this stuff as well. So Deb, I was going to ask you, when you got a hold of Emory, are they still taking or accepting people for the extended study?
I still get all the notifications, but I don't know, because like, even my sister-in-law, who's from southern Michigan, and my brother's here, he has joint issues and he's also has the thyroid. They had 4 miscarriages.
Right.
Yeah, four miscarriages.
Yeah, the miscarriage was a big thing during that era.
Yeah.
I know Carol had miscarriages, my brother's wives had miscarriages. I mean, it was a lot of people were in, you always are gonna have that in childbirth to a certain extent, but not to the extent that we were seeing it. But if you were to go to anybody in government during that time, they'd say, you just got a genetic problem.
The state done all they could to cover it up.
They did.
I was supervisor of Garfield Township at that time. And when the county commissioner, chairman, Harry Hall, and myself went up to that site, we wouldn't let in. We went back about 3 days later, and I don't remember the guy's, a state guy, a representative, was with us, and we got to go in then.
Yeah, they really
But
restricted it.
They were, you know,
Quiet.
other than the semis going down a 2-track in the middle of nowhere, they would have kept that burial
Yeah,
site totally quiet.
They kept it quiet. Somewhere in the archives, there's a picture of me taken by a newspaper reporter. I'm standing on a bank in uniform, looking down into the pit. And I should have got a copy of that. What's that?
The 15 foot?
Yeah, that's the other thing. They said it was only 15 foot. In reality, I estimated somewhere around 45 feet.
They had Calcon's drag line, which wasn't Calcon at that time, it was Hogerheide.
Yeah, it was Eamon's. I remember
Yeah,
that.
the Eamon's Hogerheide
Yeah.
drag line up there digging holes.
Yeah.
You don't dig holes with
15 feet, yeah, use a bulldozer for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were going,
So-
yes.
My name's Cal Benke, and I'm not a farmer, but I do like to watch them on TV. I'd like to thank everyone for what they brought to the table and keeping us abreast on this situation that's gone on. I first moved here in 1974, so I was right on the cusp of what was going on and well aware of it and learning about it as it went on. I also know that there's an excellent book out about it. I've read the book twice. I can't come up with the name of it. Does anyone know that?
I know a book, but there's a movie as well.
Yeah, there's
The
a
movie is, Ron Howard did the movie. It's
we've
called
seen
Bitter Harbor.
Bitter
It's
Harbor.
an excellent movie that is pretty factual.
That's
I was
worth
gonna
watching.
suggest that, if you want some pseudo documentary, watch that movie because they do have actual footage of it, of
They do.
what happened at in the end of the movie.
Yeah. It's a good movie.
So thank you all for all of you and continuing your interest of what's going on here.
I have a question. The Michigan Farm Bureau, do they still produce feed or
No.
is that all done?
I mean, Michigan Farm Bureau now is more associated with insurance. You have 2 types of membership in the Michigan Farm Bureau. You have regular members and associate members. Regular members were the farmers. Associate members are people who bought insurance and dealt with them in other ways. What they used to do for farmers has pretty well gone away. Michigan State still
That's
is.
not totally true in the southern part of the state.
Yeah, we're more active farmers.
They're very politically
Yeah.
active.
Yeah, that was the other thing they did. They lobbied, and they still do. They're a strong lobby. Now the people in charge of the Farm Bureau are more reputable, and they truly try to help farmers. So I'm not trying to put down the Farm Bureau. It's just at the time, and the people who were there at the time were trying to cover their bases and not have to.
I just wanted to add, the other thing I didn't mention was, my dad, after we cleaned up, and we did the cleanup, and, he went back into farming, and, just before the buyouts in the 80s, he had to sell his cows, cause they were paying for dead cows still.
I know it was.
That loan was not, you know, gone away.
Okay,
This could go on forever because it's a very,
Let's give them a big hand. Excellent. Thank you both. It was really excellent. Thank you all for coming too.
Yes.
Go ahead, Joyce. Did you want to say?
no, just